Hi and welcome to this fourth video in the Get Started series. You'll find the files used in this video in the folder int05. In this video we're just going to be looking at one or two things that you might do to tidy up your run so that it's ready to produce a batch of cross tabulations, because that's obviously the main purpose of MRDCL, to produce batches of cross tabulations. And we haven't done much in this session to put in new variables. We're just going to tidy it up so it's ready to run. So the first thing we're going to do is look at question 1, and previously that had an X label here. It said X equals yes, no, not stated, and now we can see there's a set of labels with a V and a set of labels here with an H. Now there's a good reason for that. What I want in this particular run is to show the labels slightly differently if the question is tabulated vertically, hence the V labels, and if it's tabulated horizontally, hence the H labels. So when it's tabulated vertically as rows of a table, we'll get these labels, whereas when it's tabulated horizontally, we'll get these labels. Now they're not quite the same, they're slightly different, and this is obviously a good tool to be able to use when you have long text, for example. So it's okay to have quite a long text for rows of a table, but when you've got that same piece of text as the columns, it really needs to be much shorter and concise or abbreviated in some way. So in this particular case, you'll see a couple of differences. The first thing you'll see is when it's a vertical label set, you'll see there's a less than Z greater than, which we call a box Z, and what that will do is that will suppress that row if it happens to be 0. So what will happen on the tables is that if yes and no add to 100%, the not stated will disappear because it will be 0 suppressed. But if there's a certain number percentage, it could be 1 upwards, 10%, whatever it might be, in the not stated category, it will appear on the tables. So that's use of a label control just to tidy up what that will look like. And I must admit, most not stated, I tend to put a box Z on there so that it disappears. We get to the horizontal labels. You can see here we've got this piece of text, ever used MRDCL with a backslash. Now what that will do is it will put a heading automatically centered above the columns yes, no and not stated, and the backslash is just basically a heading. It will do all the centering for you, and that will appear only when it's tabulated horizontally. And the texts are the same, although you can see the not stated here I've abbreviated to NS, just because it'll look a little bit tidier as NS rather than not stated. Here you'll see the label control is an S rather than a Z, so the boxed S, that means suppress it anyway. So I don't want to see not stated on when it's across the top of a table as a header or a banner, as people call it. I actually want it to disappear regardless of whether there's any figures in there or not. I'm not just suppressing it when it's 0, I'm just suppressing it in all cases, because the likelihood is it'll just be a small number of people. So that's suppressing that. Otherwise, it's the same as having X labels. The texts are broadly the same, but I've actually nominated here to have a separate set of labels when it's vertically and horizontally. Whereas when we get to question 2, you can see I've opted to have exactly the same labels regardless of whether it's tabulated vertically or horizontally, and that's what an X label does. It'll work whether it's tabulated either way. So typically you either have an X label or a V and an H label. Alright, let's move on. Let's go down to question 3 now. Now question 3 is slightly different from the way it was before. At question 3 here you can see there's a Q3A which picks up the number of children aged 0 to 8, and the number of children from the next field is Q3B, IQ3B, which is the number of aged 9 to 16. You'll see that here's the first field, so we've got the first respondent's got 1 child aged 0 to 8 and no children aged 9 to 16, whereas the second respondent's got 3 in the younger age group and 1 in the second age group, and the third respondent, none in the youngest and 2 in the older age group. So what we can do now is that if we want to, we could add that together in a new variable. So we could say that IQ3 is the sum of IQ3A plus IQ3B. And we're sort of by the back door here, learning that you can use the mathematical operators plus for plus, minus for minus, asterisk for multiply, and forward slash for divide. And you can carry out arithmetic on variables. This will work from left to right, rather like the way definitions did as explained in the previous video. So if we add two numbers together and then multiply them, the arithmetic would work from left to right. It's always a good idea to put in brackets if you start adding two numbers together or subtracting, as well as multiplying and dividing. And brackets will be honoured in exactly the same way as variable definitions for single and multi-response questions. One thing worth knowing here, although we're adding two integers together here, the result is an integer. Now if these were had decimal places in there, that would automatically round it to the nearest whole number. So if we were adding 2.3 to 2.4, it would just round that up to 5. But of course, these are numbers of children, they're whole numbers already, so it's just going to take the sum in IQ3. And then the variable Q3 is just grouping children together in terms of no children, one child, 2, 3, and 3, more than 3. And we can see another label control here, so that row or column, if it would disappear if it happened to be 0. Now we come to question 4, and we can see the use of another label control. We've got a question here that picks up a rating scale 1 to 5. And what we want to do with this is to give scores, so that mean scores and standard deviations and any other statistics that we have opted to produce on our tables come out automatically. So here I'm putting in a piece of text that says that very good, it gets a value of 5. And in a boxed V5 here, or a less than V5 label control, we're giving it the score of value of 5. And so that will get counted as 5 automatically. The next one is scored as 4, 3, 2 and 1. And the not stated, you'll notice that it's got no label control for V. It will just get excluded from all mean score calculations because it doesn't have a label control with V on it. It does have a label control with Z, which will once again 0 suppress that. So if nobody gives not stated, it will disappear off the table. So that's how we can do mean scores on questions with responses. That all works fine for us. We can actually leave out this text here and not put the 5 in, and there is a format option that allows us to print stats values on tables automatically using the value in the boxed V5, boxed V4, etc. Alright, so we've now picked up some variables. One thing that you typically want to do on a batch of tables is to have a banner, and a banner is what I would call where you put various questions together. Often these are demographics, so often you might put age, gender, region, and so on, and then perhaps some other key questions. Well, we haven't got those questions on this example questionnaire, so what I'm doing is I'm putting question 1 as it stands. So question 1 is going to just get put in exactly as it is in the variable. Question 2, I'm just picking up the first 3 bits. So if we go back to question 2, we'll see it's got 4 bits in it. The ate at a restaurant, went to see a film, went to watch a sporting event. It's going to therefore exclude that 4th one, none not stated. We'll just see the first 3 in the variable my banner. And then question 4, this rating scale that we just looked at up here, we're going to group that together with the people who agree in codes 1 to 2. We could have put 1 plus 2 there. The people who in the average category, and the people in the poor category in the 4 or 5 category. And then to specify the labels that we want, we've taken Q1 just as it was in the horizontal labels, just as it was defined at the top, so it'll get that heading. A plus indicates that we're now going to add some more labels to it. And now we're going into quotes to actually specify what we want here. Now, I could have just pasted in the labels from up here if I wanted to, but if that was a lot of work, I could have actually just copied that and pasted it in down the bottom here. That would have worked perfectly fine, but I can just take the labels as they stand without having to do copying and pasting. And I always try to avoid copying and pasting when I'm doing anything in an MRDCL script. So here's my heading for question 2. There's the backslash indicating the heading. I don't need to try and adjust it or center it. MRDCL will do that all for you. Now you'll see the word restaurant. Now you'll see that it's been split up with dashes and spaces. Now MRDCL will automatically put text on separate lines where it can't fit it in. So say we allow just 5 characters per line for each of the columns in our tables, it would probably split that up as RESTA and then URANT on the next line. But I want it to sort of break up more phonetically, so I've actually given it a place to split. And MRDCL looks for gaps or dashes as a way to split words up. And so I'm almost inviting it to say, well, can you break it up with rest on the first line with a hyphen, A on the next line with a hyphen, and RANT on the next line. With the next one, saw film, we don't need to split that up because both of those will fit into 5 characters. But with sporting, another way of splitting lines is to put an asterisk in there, which is a way of just telling it to force it to break here and put that TING on a separate line. And again, the space here will put it onto a new line. I could have just put a space in here and it will work just as well. Then I come to question 4, the postal service being rated good, average or poor. So that's shown you how to set up a banner, and that can be many more columns than that. It can actually be up to 9,999 items in there that you can tabulate by. Again, MRDCL, if you're producing a text file, will automatically throw new pages if it can't fit anything on one page. And if it can, it will look for a break in the headings to find a way of splitting the table sensibly so they look good when they come out. All right, so that's my data stage. I'm now going to move on to my table stage. Once again, we've got a special here. We've got a job header, which is centered, called My Project. We've got a special text label here so that the word for the average mean score comes out as the word average. By default, it would come out as mean score. If we put %AVG in, we're going to change that for every table that follows it to the word average rather than mean score. And I've picked a label control here, and that label control means I want 2 decimal places for my mean score. So if the mean score is 1.53, that's what I'll see rather than the default of 1 decimal place. Now I put in a job footer, and again you'll see that centered, and the text for that is prepared by a really good MRDCL scriptwriter. And then you'll see some more label controls here, and what that's going to pull in is dynamically it'll pull in the date, the month and the year. So you can get the number of the month, you can get the text for the month and the year, and you can have just the year as 2 digits rather than as 4 digits with ampersand year. Ampersand YY would give you a 2-digit month. So that's given me the date, month and the year, and that will automatically appear. I could, if I wanted to, put the time on it, the hours, the minutes and the seconds if I wanted to, for example, and that would actually sort of identify when that run was actually carried out so that we could actually look back and see when that run was produced and check that it was run at a time that we thought we'd produced it rather than perhaps at a previous time or date. Now we move on. We've got a global BT hash for the standard base title. We've got some format options here. We've got decimal places to 1 decimal place, and we've got standard deviation and a couple of other formats. We've set a global banner called My Banner. So what's going to happen is that banner there called My Banner that we specified, grouping question 1, 2 and 3 in different ways, will appear on every table where there is no banner specified. So this means select the standard banner to be the variable called My Banner where there's no banner specified. So for these first tables, it won't use My Banner because there's already a banner there. So for this table, it's got Q2 there, so it's going to use Q2 as the banner. But when we get further down to these tables, there is no banner, so it just says Q1 star, so nothing after it. So what it's going to do for us is put my banner in there. It would be the same effectively as typing the word my banner in there, and then for the next one and so on. So it's a quick way of saying for every table or for a batch of tables, I want my banner to be the default, except where I actually specify what I want. If you want to stop that happening, you can just say select banner unset, and then for all subsequent tables, it wouldn't do that. You'll just get a total only column if you had nothing after the asterisk. So that completes our run. Let's now run those tables and see what we get. So let's have a look at the tables. And here they are. So here's the first table, which was question 1 by question 2. We've got 1 decimal place here. There was no heading here, so there's no heading to see centered. Let's scroll down. We have got our title in now, and if we scroll across, we would find the date over to the right hand side here. And we've got a second table. Now that is underlined now and centered for us, so that's where question 1's put across the top. That's automatically centered. Ever used MRDCL and underlined it. And it's also removed the not stated from this because nobody had said not stated in our 3 respondents. Here's our mean score to 2 decimal places with the word average. There's the standard deviation. There's another cross tab that we've got. And we have another one, a table fourth. And now we come, I think, to where we have my banner coming up. So we've got question 1 by my banner. And you can see here what it's done. It's put Q1 here, Q2 centering the heading, and Q3 centering the heading above each of the columns. And it's also left an extra gap in here, and it's split the words just as we wanted them for the table. So our tables now look pretty much as we want them. And if we scroll down, we get some more tables and 1 decimal place on the percentages there as requested. So that completes this video on putting a run together. Obviously most projects would have many more tables than this, but hopefully that gives you some insight into how you would approach getting a good looking set of tables in a text format. Thank you.